Hi, my friends. It's the Iron Underneath here. How are you doing? I hope well. I'm kind of sick, so I'm drinking tea, and I probably sound like crap, but I hope you enjoy this video because I had to do it because it's so interesting. I've been talking a lot about the Bloodstone Emperor and the great empire of the Dawn and the god emperors that ruled during that time. That was the first time that the long night, well, the only time the long night came. So, looking at the fact that we're going into a long night, it seems, I wanted to go back and look at why the first long night happened and why it'll happen again. That'll tell us why it'll happen again, because things repeat themselves. So, I started looking at the god emperors and empresses of the great empire of the Dawn, besides the Bloodstone Emperor himself. And what I found is extremely fascinating. I wanted to look at their eye colors and the constellations they represent. And I started with their gemstones, and it led me down a path that was so incredible that just explaining the gemstones and what they mean themselves is going to be a long enough video, so I'll have to do two parts probably, where the second part is the constellations and the colors. But a little bit of the colors I'll explain here and the meanings of the gemstones. So it starts with the Lion of Night, of course, and then Maiden Maid of Light. And they had one son who was called the God on Earth. There's not a ton about this in the world of Ice and Fire. There's a little bit about a few other emperors, but I wanted to talk about these because they're so interesting. It was the Pearl Emperor that was said to have built the 5 forts, and now I see why. The Pearl Emperor was, if you will, the grandson of the Lion of Night and the Maiden Maid of Light. I mean, this is myth, and it's 15,000 years old. The god on Earth had an eldest son named the Pearl Emperor, and he represents white, which is the color of stars, and it comes from the ocean. Pearls enhance personal integrity and finding the true self. Now, most of the story is about finding who you really are and what your destiny is. And it's also associated, the pearl, with the matrix of life. So this Pearl Emperor seems to have been really compassionate and wanting to protect his people from his grandfather, let's say, his ancestor, the Lion of Night. Because in the world of Ice and Fire, when it talks about the Lion of Night, it says the Lion of Night and his demons. And that is why the 5 forts were built, was to keep the Lion of Night and his demons out of the realms of men. Just like the wall in Westeros, built to keep the others away from the realms of men. So, it's exactly the same thing, except the 5 forts are made of a black stone. Now, these black stones are really important, too, and this is, I believe, where they come from. I talked about the Bloodstone Emperor a lot and how he made his people worship a black stone that had fallen from the sky. So it's a meteorite. And that's the same thing that Dawn's made out of. So when we get to that part, I think it's, well, through this whole thing, I think it's important to keep in mind the black stones and the black trees also. Because we're at a point now where we'll be finding out which one is the one that is helpful and the one that is not. And I think it might just be that black is good and white is not good. But I could be totally wrong. I don't know. It's just this weird feeling I'm getting from this. Pearls aren't just gems also. They are a veritable storehouse for goodwill and positivity. And they also remember all things good and true. So there again, we remember, like House Royce's words, we remember. The trees remember. The stones remember. Everything remembers. The North remembers. And that's because the trees remember and because of guest right. And then I did a video on that with Mythos of Ice and Fire that's since been taken down because she's unfortunately disappeared. And I'm really bummed about that. So I'm going to do it again. It's really cool. It's about how Ned Stark is the true king of Winterfell. And I think it's the most brilliant thing. I love it so much. And so keep in mind Ned Stark too through this story. And keep in mind people like Cersei and how history goes down. How is Ned Stark going to be remembered in history? He's going to be remembered as a traitor who had his head chopped off on the Sept of Baelor, on the Great Sept of Baelor. And Cersei Lannister is going to go down in history as a queen. And I guarantee you the scribes are already writing as fast as they can for her to show you what a wonderful queen she is and how beautiful she was. And Joffrey's going to go down as a king, which he was, but he wasn't. He was just a horrible, horrible person who abused power, a child who loved to kill things. And Robb Stark will go down as a rebel, a traitor. It's terrible to think about that. And even Robert Baratheon will go down as 20 years of peace under Robert Baratheon. Or 20 years of peace. But it's Jon Arryn that was attributed to. No one will know that. They'll just know that he was his hand and he died of sickness of the bowels. So, the pearl seems to represent growing and finding also the balance of the body's natural rhythms with lunar cycles. So it's all about aligning yourself with the earth and with the stars and the planets and keeping the truth of yourself and being strong and knowing your purpose. So that's how things start. And then we go to the Jade Emperor. Now, the Jade Emperor is really interesting because all the stones that combat addiction are jade. It's known to combat addiction or any kind of like obsession kind of stuff. So, in this day and age that we're talking about here in A Song of Ice and Fire is more like this stone combats against being enthralled by another, like the Lion of Night, because he was the original Night's King, I think. So Jade is known as the calm in the storm, and it's said to bless whomever it touches. So that's probably what the Jade Emperor did. And this is probably who wrote the Jade Compendium as well. And that's something we would all love to get our hands on. And that John will read and Sam will read, and hopefully we'll get to hear some of it. I really hope so. The jade is said to be the ultimate dream stone. So they were also trying to ascend in their dreams. They were lucid dreaming and astral projecting. The jade was revered in ancient cultures. It can be used to access the spiritual world, to gain insight into ritualistic knowledge, and encourage protection, ensuring long life and a peaceful death. A death ascending to the stars to be with your forebears. And even carry jade into battle because it's a talisman that protects them. If blood is shed, if you have a wound, jade is said to heal it and stop the blood. It also signifies wisdom, gathered in tranquility, encouraging beings to dispel the negative and see themselves for who they really are. Again, seeing yourself for who you really are, knowing yourself, knowing your destiny. It was thought that it granted its bearer the power of invisibility, which is a warg, a skin changer, a green seer maybe. Jade, green, could very well be. The jade stone is used to absorb fear and to bring fear of the evil eye into you, dispel fear itself, but to put the fear of God into you, or the fear of the evil eye into you, because this is magic, and you want to make sure that you're protected when people have the will to do magic. They can hurt you badly, as we've seen. Some say the jade stone is able to absorb thoughts and feelings and enhance them and send them back to the source. So basically that's the Lion of Night sending negativity into the Empire, and the Jade Emperor taking it in, absorbing it, and then flipping it on them and sending it back to the Lion of Night, like, no, won't have it. So he really protected people. The next one is the Tourmaline Emperor. Sometimes a blue so deep that it appears black. Stonehenge, the stones are actually a very, very dark blue, and they were gathered because of that. They were found and brought to where Stonehenge stands today. Tourmaline is black. Ancient magicians relied on black tourmaline to protect them from earth demons as they cast their spells. So, earth demons in this story are others. So, again, the next emperor, and by the way, all these gemstones are quartz. Quartz remembers everything. So, all these emperors were guarding against the Lion of Night, guarding their men. They were like the Night's Watch itself. And who better to fight the Lion of Night than his descendants? So, it was Tourmaline protects men from earth demons as they cast their spells. That could also be people like Bloodraven. It could be different than just simple witches or magic. It could be very dark sorcery, necromancy, all these things that we're experiencing in these books. It also is a talisman and a psychic shield that deflects negative energy and promotes a sense of power and confidence. So again, they're instilling the people with confidence and power and belief in themselves. It allows for a clear and objective view of the world, which is like, this is where the world was built from. So an objective view of the world is the best leader you could have. It empowers those who must live in a challenging or difficult situation or surroundings. So geographically, this was not an easy place to live, because you had to fight off the Lion of Night and his demons. The most common form of tourmaline is called, a word that I don't want to butcher, so it is spelled Schorl. Schorl. Anyway, it's black, sometimes a blue so deep that it appears black, like I just said. The tourmaline also is prismatic. It can be all colors, and it is vertically striated, so it might be long and slender or thick and columnar. This makes me think of the spears of the Merlin King and the five forts themselves. So it just makes me think that these are the people that placed these black stones around. And these black stones have a lot of importance when it comes to personal ascension and spirituality. So they also, people go to these stones for protection from harm, spiritual harm. And Aegon used to go to Dragonstone to think, and everybody couldn't figure out why, because it smelled like brimstone. It was brimstone because of the dragons. They are brimstone. But it smells, and so nobody could figure out why Aegon always wanted to go there. This is why. He wanted to learn and ascend and think. And this stone helps it. It's also devoted to, tourmaline is also devoted to bringing a clear expression of light into the world and into the lives of those drawn into its powers. So this is all the people are being drawn into the power of the Tourmaline Emperor. And it also furthers the ability to remain radiant in the darkest of times and to maintain a spiritual consciousness, while among those who aren't always in the light do not understand the love of the universe. So they were struggling with good and bad. They were struggling with people who were doing things that weren't acceptable, like always in societies. But we have a description that I gave in my last video about how the people were, it was kind of like the way the wildlings are behaving now. They were behaving that way. And outside the walls, noble lords and petty lords were committing murder, incest, sins. The next emperor after the Tourmaline is the Onyx Emperor. And onyx, as we know, is also black, and it can be very shiny. It's never been described as oily, but it's very shiny. It's known to separate. It helps release negative emotions like sorrow and grief. So it seems like a lot of people were being lost during this time. They were being taken, or they were somehow getting sick, or they were probably being killed by the Lion of Night and his demons, but I don't know. But there was sorrow and grief at that time. Onyx is used also to end unhappy or bothersome relationships. Now, this is probably also the relationship with the Lion of Night, and maybe even with the Maiden Maid of Light, because if somebody turns their back on the world and they're the light, Onyx is also quartz, and it represents Leo as well. And the name comes from the Assyrian name for ring. Again, rings of stones, ritual, sacrifice, and magic. They repel negative energy, and they actually absorb and transform negative energy. So again, they're taking the Lion of Night's bad energy, his negative energy and forces, and turning it back on him. It helps with the gathering of emotional and physical strength and stamina when support is needed, in times of stress, confusion, or grief. So something was happening during this time, some kind of war, some kind of attack. The next emperor is the Topaz Emperor, and the topaz is blue, and it represents the Martyr Stone, which is so cool. It's George's little, hi, I'm here. And it's also kind of saying, when you're blocked, this is the communication stone. It's the stone of the word that carries the word. And it heals physical defects, which restricts speaking, unites the mind, body, and spirit. It opens the third eye chakra. So this is like Babylon when it fell, because the word was jumbled. And it broke apart the people. They couldn't communicate. So how do you survive? The interesting thing about this one is that it's the birthstone of December, and it represents the constellation Sagittarius, which is also the archer in our world. I think probably in the world of Ice and Fire, it's the warrior, because he's the one who's pointing the sword, and he's pointing the sword right at the red star of Scorpio. This star is blue. It's most likely Uranus, or probably Uranus, or it could be, well, it could be another star, but it's most likely a planet. I think almost all of these are planets and moons and sun. So it's blue shooting an arrow at red in the sky. It's blue kind of, this is the stone that attunes you to the angels of truth and wisdom, and actually may truly help you contact angels. Angels, blue, angels killing red, angels that come from blue, that's Ice and Fire. But they're trying to come together. These god emperors are trying to bring people together. So, but in the skies, the war is playing out. While the Game of Thrones goes on in Westeros, the others are coming, and magic has come back, and all kinds of things are going on that they can't see because they're playing the Game of Thrones. In the beginning, they were fighting for land, wealth, things like this, but they were also doing major spiritual work and trying to ascend the stars. And so they were so much further ahead than the people of Westeros are now, because they're all mired about wealth and greed and crowns and kings and queens. So the interesting part about this is that in Greek mythology and in Babylonian mythology, Sagittarius represents the centaur, half human, half horse. And Lady Barbary Dustin calls Brandon and Lyanna Stark two centaurs. And that's really interesting and really cool, and I'll get into that in the astrology part. But it neighbors the constellation of Scorpio, which is the red star. So blue and red are right together. In Babylonian myth, Sagittarius is associated with the centaur-like god. It's also depicted with two heads, one human, one panther with wings, and the stinger of a scorpion's tail positioned above a horse's tail. So this is including the houses now and certain people. The next one is the Amethyst Empress, and she is the one that, along with the Bloodstone Emperor, are the crux of this. The Amethyst Empress, amethyst is purple, of course it's quartz also, so it remembers actually the most. And purple is a very powerful color in magic. It is the stone. It's a stone of psychic awareness. It's used in divination. It's associated with Aquarius, which is in the sky, situated between Capricorn and Pisces, which is the black goat, the black fish, and the fish. So that, later on, that's the black fish, and that's the black goat of Qohor, and I'll get into that at another time. Aquarius is defined as the Great One, and also represents winter solstice in the early Bronze Age. So really, when Aquarius puts his jar into the river, it's the beginning of spring. So this represents most likely the beginning of spring, of dawn. But I think the reason that it represents that is because she was the one who was killed by her brother, who named himself the Bloodstone Emperor. Her throne was usurped by him, and she was killed, and he has been credited with not only starting the Long Night, but with kinslaying and usurping the throne from her. A lot of people think that the Bloodstone Emperor is Azor Ahai, and I'm starting to believe that, because he chose his own name, the Bloodstone Emperor. Now, the Bloodstone name means it's also heliotrope. It's a green stone with red dots on it, and they look like blood droplets. They really do. The Greek name heliotrope furthers the Christ consciousness, the divine mind, the Buddha nature connection with the Son, or the Son of God, the S-O-N Son, or the S-U-N Son of God. Heliotrope means turn towards the sun, which is deeply meaningful to those striving to walk the path of light. Now, this is what all of these emperors have been doing, trying to get people to the right, to the light, to the right path, and believe in themselves. Another translation for it is self-turning, which alludes to our own personal responsibility for the way in which we strive for illumination and for a good, full, satisfying life. We can't do it by greed and lust and gluttony and all of that. It doesn't bring you a good life. It brings you misery. And the gods don't look on it favorably. So the Bloodstone also is mind, body, and spirit. In the mind, it represents self-awareness, clarity, success, family, love, courage, solutions, motivation, and deterring anger. In the body, it represents energy, blood-related disorders, pregnancy, a talisman for pregnancy. So, something that would help birth a child or something else. Strength, passion. In the spirit, it represents the divine mind, enlightenment, and the ancestors, the guardian spirits from a bloodline. So, the bloodstone is said to have the red drops on it because of blood actually dropping on the stone. And the Christians say that it's Christ's blood that dropped into the soil when he was on the cross, and it eventually solidified into the stone, and it's green for the green of the earth, with blood droplets on it from the blood of Christ. So it is called the Martyr Stone. Now, that's interesting to me because the Bloodstone Emperor is supposed to be a cannibal, a necromancer, a torturer, an enslaver, and all these horrible things. But he's represented by one of the most healing stones of all, and also the stone of the martyr, the stone of the one who gives his life for mankind. The Bloodstone Emperor, I think, is the one who slew the Lion of Night, or stopped him. And I think the way he did that was by killing his sister, the Amethyst Empress, who had already found her way to ascend. She, actually, Amethyst also represents lucid dreaming, astral projection. It's very, very powerful in the spiritual plane. So she, I think, had already gotten there. She had already ascended. She was pleased with her life. She was content. She was done. And she was ready to sacrifice herself. And she did, I think, to the Bloodstone Emperor. I think she was his Nisa Nisa. He was trying so hard, obviously, through what I've read. These are, every emperor, a war is building, or tensions are building. Something's building. And it has to do with the Lion of Night and his demons. So, it goes to reason that by the 9th emperor of the Lion made of night, the Lion of Night and the Maiden made of light, that he would finally say, this is enough. My people aren't going to suffer anymore. And the Amethyst Empress might have very well have said that too. So, meteors fell after the moon cracked. Well, the Maiden Maid of Light turned her back on the world. She also turned her back on her children. So her children martyred themselves, and one became Azor Ahai, and one became Nisa Nisa. And that's the legend. And I think this is where it comes from. So I think that if, like I said, if you look at history, how it will go down now with the current characters that we know, like Ned Stark and Cersei and, you know, people like that, the good people most of the time go down terribly in history until we find out way later on that they weren't bad. It was the people who won who were bad, who might have even been evil in some ways. But since they won, they write history. The winners write history. And, you know, it's the same as Varys says. Power resides where men think it does. So, but these emperors seem to be shaping people to be good. And so it makes me, it really even kind of brings it home more that this emperor would slay his sister who gave her life for this cause to save the people. and stop the long night. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And so thank you so much for stopping by. I hope my voice isn't too hoarse. I can't believe you're watching me smoke through being sick. That's terrible. But there's one more thing I wanted to address really quick. I had to take down my video about the black bark trees because of a really, really, really horrible troll. And his name is Dejan Pleko. I'm going to call this guy out because he slandered my name. And the minute I banned him and blocked him and talked to the legal department and YouTube about him, he immediately took his shitty comments down and gave me the first downvote I've ever gotten, which is fine. But just do that. You don't need to write shitty comments. So I say this in my description. It's not going to fly on this channel. So, you know, this is a hobby. But I go so far as to do research for hours and hours. I usually do these videos in the middle of the night when I'm exhausted. And, you know, it's really nobody's business, actually, what's going on in my life. But since, you know, you're my subscribers and I love you to death, I'll tell you what's going on in my life. I'm a wife. I'm trying to get pregnant. I'm an aunt. I have a huge family. And my hormones are going through hell right now. And also, you know, like I said, I'm a wife. And I'm a lot of things. And I also work. I'm a model. I do a lot of different things. I also was an actress since the age of 5. And I'll tell you something. I worked in Hollywood for 17 years. And I have never heard a comment as bad as the one this guy made. And it was slanderous. So I have to do something about it. And unfortunately now, too, I have to make that video over again. But whatever, that's fine. I just want everybody to know the name of this guy. Dejan, D-E-J-N, Pleko, P-L-E-C-K-O, who really screwed up and slandered my name and said something very, very derogatory and defamed my character publicly. Freedom of speech, but you don't get to slander people. So all I could think of when I saw it was, first I thought of quitting, and I made a video sobbing, telling you guys I was quitting. And then I remembered the words of Michelle Obama last week. And she said, when they go low, we go high. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm not going to let some idiot that has no life get me down. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I might not be able to do these more than once a week, but that's fine. At least I'm doing some. And as you can see, they all take me a lot of work. So I so appreciate my subscribers and my subscribers to be. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate this community. I love being a part of it. And so I want to thank you for being here, and thank you for your wonderful comments, and for never once saying anything derogatory or even halfway derogatory. You guys are the best. Okay? Valar Morghulis. See you soon.